Oh, really?
And we're now live, but we can keep talking. But
Okay.
because we have on my side of the state, we have snow in the eastern part
Right.
of Iowa. We're pretty much we got probably right about now about 5-6 inches on the ground. There's some drifts up to a foot or a foot and a half. Western Iowa has no snow on the ground. They got up into the 60s today. I was
Yeah.
30.
Typical.
And it's like, ugh. So I'm thinking, when is this going to warm up? So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting. The March sun is so strong this time of the year, it doesn't even have to be above freezing. The snow will melt on especially metal surfaces. So, but anyway, anybody who's watching this either live or later on, this is Polygon Issuance number 49. This is being done on the 6th of March, 2015. It's supposed to be springtime, or at least meteorological spring, but for quite a few places, it ain't spring yet. Especially the south, the mid-south especially, where they got dumped on with a bunch of snow. Probably as much snow as you typically see that our guest has seen in some lake effect bands. From what I've heard, about 12 to 15 or 20 inches I've seen down there in Kentucky, which I don't think they're used to down there. So, in any case, otherwise, it's temperatures around here. My side of the state's cold. The western side of the state's warm. And where our guest is in Utica, New York, it's probably not much different than where I'm at, cold and lousy.
Yeah, it's been like that for about the last month or so. Tonight's actually one of our colder nights. My forecast, we're going into the single digits tonight. Last night we were below 0, so it's been a rough spring so far for us. Hold on, I think someone's coming in the studio. Yeah, it's been a pretty rough winter for us and start to meteorological spring. Not so much spring-like up here in central New York. We just finished the coldest February on record. The old record is actually back in 1857, and we crushed it by 2 degrees on the average temperature for the entire month. So it's been brutal, for sure.
It makes you wonder why you came to Utica, because your previous job, I think, was in Redding, California, I think it was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
it makes you think, why did I come back here? Because I know
Yeah,
you're
and
from further west. You're from south of Rochester, but it's like,
yes.
yeah, I don't want to live here now because it's cold. I mean,
Yeah, it's pretty bad this winter anyway. And I actually came back because I love winter. That's why that's what got me into weather in the first place. And everywhere I've gone in my career, and even when I was in college, I guess winter in Iowa can be pretty brutal. I'll give you that. But I've always told anyone that's not from around here, like, you guys don't know what a real winter is like. So it's kind of funny that I came back and this is one of the worst months in recent history. It's kind of ironic, I guess. I really did get winter. I came here saying I want a good winter, and we've had pretty good snowfall this season. That's really what I wanted. I didn't want so much sub-zero temperatures, wind chill warnings for like days straight, but that's what we've gotten.
well, it'd be like last year in Iowa, where it seemed like we were under a wind chill advisory like every night for like weeks. And this year wasn't as bad, but the thing about it here is we had what I would call bipolar winter. We had, I'll include November just for the sake of this. November was horribly cold. December and January were very warm. February was horribly cold. And at the end, I think it said we were like near normal. And I'm thinking, yeah, February was not normal. I don't care about December and January because nobody cares about December and January. We had virtually no snow on the ground Christmas Day at all. Very little, if any. Some places didn't have any snow. And it seemed like right after New Year's, even January is still warm, but it seemed like the snow just came and just stuck around after that big snow we had on the last day of January, early February, where we had about 10 to 14 inches of snow, and it just stuck. Every other snowstorm we've had in Iowa since then, it would snow, and it wouldn't snow again until all of it melted. And that happened at least 5 or 6 times, which was very odd. And then it just dumped snow beginning of February, and it's been around since, except in western Iowa where it finally melted. So it's like bipolar. I mean, like you said last night there, it was below zero. It was below zero here last night, but we still got into the mid-30s today because the temperature just shot up. The low last night was at 10 o'clock at night, and then it just went up, and by dawn it was like 6, 7, 8, and then it was like 35. Like good for March sunshine.
Nice. Yeah, we got above freezing for the first time a couple days ago, for the first time since February 4th. So we've had a pretty long stretch of below freezing temperatures, but it's just kind of a continuation of that coldest February on record. I know pretty much everyone around here is very used to winter, but this one is particularly harsh on everyone. So it's not just me being a little bit weak since I haven't been back for a New York winter in 7 years now, but pretty much everyone, I see people out in public and they're like, is it ever going to be warm again? And I'm like, I don't know. We really have to get a good pattern shift to even keep warm air around, because we will get back above freezing for a time next week, but it's just, this is a good location for those quick little troughs to set up and just sit over top of us for long periods of time.
Now, how much snow is around there now? Because I'd worry that if you have so much snow and it has a lot of moisture content, wouldn't that flood a lot of the rivers, especially the Mohawk River?
Yeah, that's going to be a big issue over the next few weeks. We've got, I think, 27 inches on the ground in Utica. Some of the areas up north of here on the Tug Hill have 3 feet plus. But the setup for next week is going to be ideal, like the perfect situation for a good melting without a ton of consequence right now, because we don't really have any chances of precip early next week, and we will get above freezing during the day. We go back below freezing overnight, so it won't be 24 hours on 24 hours of melting, and that water to go nowhere, because we've got very cold soil temperatures, but the soil's really dry. So I think minor flooding is going to be an issue over the next 2-3 weeks. We've got a lot of low-lying communities around here. A lot of the populated areas are along the river, as you might imagine. So I think we will have a little bit of an issue, but I think it's going to be a bigger issue if we get really warm days in the near future and stay above freezing overnight and get hours on hours of straight melting back into the river and just into the lower lying areas in general. So it's definitely something that I've been keeping an eye on. Those hydrological outlooks, been keeping an eye on those. For the next 2 weeks, they have us in a minor risk for flooding, so I'm not too concerned about it right now, but we've got reporters that are asking me pretty much every day if we're going to get flooding, because it's going to be a big story if it does happen around here, because we just have so many people and communities along the river.
So going back to you growing up in western New York, and I assume the lake effect snow was the thing that got you into weather, so talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I think as a kid it was so common to me that we would have feet of snow on the ground. A lot of times my family lives out in kind of a rural area on top of a hill, so we got a lot of drifting, and if we didn't have snow fences set up the right way. We'd get drifts right up against our front door that would go up and over top of the door frame. So I would miss school because we literally could not get out of our house. We had a ton of snow days. We've got a lot of rural areas around my hometown. So plows did not really, keep our towns as a priority. So we did have a lot of snow days. And while all kids love to have a day off of school, I was always like, why here? Like, why is this only happening like in my county, in my town? Why isn't this happening, closer to the city, up in Rochester? If the wind's set up right, Livingston County would get smacked, but city of Rochester wouldn't get much at all. So that was always kind of fascinating to me that there was such a sharp cutoff, and it was also weird to me that people who lived in, I guess I discovered this when I went off to college, not everyone grew up with a brutal winter every winter with feet of snow on the ground. So I guess it was interesting to see how people react to winter, and it's more interesting to me now because I've been in the South, I've been on the West Coast, and winter is not a common thing there. So it's kind of the way that it's spun in every location is pretty interesting to me. The reason I went out to Iowa for school was, while I loved winter, I wanted to see a tornado so bad. But in the 4 years that I was there, went storm chasing numerous times and never saw one. And now that I've done some severe weather coverage, when I was out in Nebraska, when I was down in South Carolina, and I know like the damage that it can do to communities, I am okay with not having seen one in person.
Yeah. Maybe out in the middle of nowhere, like in a field that there's nobody within miles.
Right, yeah, that might be okay.
Yeah, like in eastern Colorado or western Kansas, but yeah. I always wanted to see a tornado, but, and I'll say this, I've never seen one, but I have heard one, and I've mentioned this numerous times about being within 3/4 of a mile of an EF2 tornado, and I was on the south side where the RFD would be, and it sounded like a vacuum cleaner. It didn't sound like a train. It sounded like a vacuum cleaner. It sounded like a big roaring noise. So, but I've heard one, but I've never seen one because it was at 11 o'clock at night, so you can't see it anyway. It was in rain, so you couldn't. But that's and I didn't know it was a tornado. I kind of sensed that it might have been something more serious than a normal severe thunderstorm. It was tornado warning, but still. So yeah, after that I'm like, yeah, I think I've heard one. So if I see one, I want it to be far away, and I'd be like, yeah, here's something off my bucket list. So, but I've heard one, I've not seen one. So, so then when you went to Iowa State, you wanted to see a tornado, which is kind of odd. But then Iowa winters, and you were at Iowa State 4 years, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you went there. Of course, the winters in Iowa are different from winters in western New York. There's no lake for lake effect. And sometimes there's a case where in Iowa, there sometimes isn't snow on the ground or very little snow on the ground. And you probably thought, well, what the heck? This is where's winter here? And you kind of mentioned it, that winter in Iowa, or winter everywhere you've been, is different from winter where you grew up and where you are now.
Yes, it was definitely different. My first winter in Iowa, when I was a freshman, we actually had a day off from classes because of the wind chill. I think there was very little snow on the ground, maybe a couple inches, but it was blowing everywhere. So buses couldn't get the commuter students and students that went off campus very well, so we had the day off. And I think the lowest wind chill I ever experienced in my life was in Iowa, and it wasn't here. I think it was -49, and all of us had a bunch of meteorology major friends, and so all of us, did the hot water in the air trick and thought this was so cool because you don't really get to experience temperatures like that very often. at least that extreme. So we took it in a positive way and thought, wow, this is really cool. But I think we were pretty much the only people on campus that were like, isn't this so cool? This is like, we go from minus 49 wind chill in the winter to in the summer. I think I experienced the highest dew point of my life while I was in Iowa. It got up to 80-degree dew point. So it felt like 110, 112 degrees. So to be able to feel those extremes, I guess, is an experience that not a lot of people get to have in their lives. So I guess I would consider myself lucky to have been through both of those extremes in one state in a couple of years worth of time.
And that's kind of odd, because I had heard that Iowa was one of the states that has the highest dew points in the entire country, higher than in the South, which I found a bit fascinating. And then I kind of thought about it, and I was like, well, there's all that corn and soybean.
Yeah, it's definitely on the corn.
It takes all the moisture and just puts it into the air.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I've seen dew points regularly at 80. And I think a lot of people would be like, 80-degree dew points, that's horrible. And poor Miami, I think they only have dew points like 75, and that's considered like hot and sweaty for them. But 80, get up here, and it's 80, and the dew index is 115, and
yeah.
I mean, except for the last few years, except last summer. Last summer we hardly. I could even say last summer we didn't have a summer, because we very rarely hit 90, which was good for the 2 summers prior to that. We hit 100 too many times, but. So then after you went to Iowa State, and of course we had Dr. Gallus on back last summer on on the show, but you ended up going, I believe at the time, to Lincoln,
yes,
to Channel 8. So you were in Cornhusker territory.
I was.
I'm sure people that went to Iowa State would, except now that Iowa State and Nebraska are not in the same conference, but it's like, yeah, you're going to enemy territory.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I remember I didn't go to many football games when I was in college. I had the season tickets my freshman year, and then would pick up the occasional ticket the other years that I was there. But I do remember Iowa State playing Nebraska while I was in school when they were still in the same conference, and I think it was a pretty close game. I can't remember if we won or not, so I guess it's not really significant, but I did have a chance to go to a couple Husker games while I was in Lincoln, and it's an insane atmosphere. Like, you pretty much can't hate the Huskers when you're in that stadium, and like everyone around you is so obsessed. It's definitely a cool college town, and I loved working there. There was a lot of super interesting weather from one extreme to the other. A fair amount of severe weather events. Nothing that was too big while I was there, and we had a couple decent snowstorms, but again, it's like 6 inches of snow there can be a really big deal, and to me it's like a little bit laughable, because here, I can be on the news and say, hey, we'll get 6 inches of snow tonight, and people are like, oh, well, that's Wednesday night.
Which is interesting, because in your case, being from New York, 6 inches of snow is like, you're going to go to school, the roads will be fine, et cetera, et cetera. 6 inches of snow in Nebraska or Iowa, school is delayed, sometimes canceled, because there's a lot of more rural areas, and they're out in the open. There's no trees and hills, and the snow blows everywhere. So, yeah, there's the difference because of I'll get it out, the being flat, very few hills and stuff like that, so that snow tends to want to blow around. Unlike in New York, it can blow around, but
it'll usually get caught on something.
It's not as big a tree, a hill, or something like that. So I would assume you only decided to stay in the area when you went from Iowa State, and you went after that to Lincoln, was because I think you still wanted to see a tornado. Because
yeah, a little bit. the station that I worked at was actually the sister station of the one in Des Moines that I interned at. So once I
WY.
graduated, once I graduated, um, I, got connected with the right people a few months after graduation and ended up flying out there and um, coming back with a job. And it's a place that I think a lot of people don't appreciate until you spend some time there. I think that's just the Midwest in general, though.
Yeah.
Nicest people in the world. I have been all over the place, and the people in Nebraska, the people in Iowa, that's like something that sticks with me for life. They're just the friendliest, and a lot of interesting weather, and surprisingly, there are things to do, unlike what everyone thinks, that it's just a corn country and everyone has, their own farm and minds their own business. It's very cool. All of the college towns are full of great food, great bars, a lot of culture and things to do every day of the week. So I loved my time in the Midwest and would love to get back there eventually. I don't know if I'd be there for a long time, or I'm actually going on vacation out there in a couple of weeks. So I'm looking forward to getting back to the Midwest, and Long Range GFS agrees with my vacation, so that's good.
Well, the thing is because I know there's a few jobs around the area, but I'm not going to entice you. But anyway, the thing about it, when the weather is so extreme, it seems like it's extreme. So you decided, I think by this point in Lincoln, you're like, yeah, I'm through with this extreme weather. You wanted to go somewhere where it was a little bit more tranquil, and I think that's when you went to South Carolina.
Yeah, South Carolina is kind of a whole different beast. Extremely humid, very humid, but I don't even know how to put this, like in a different way than the Midwest. It's definitely not the corn humidity, but yeah, hot, humid. We had a good amount of thunderstorms. A lot of them don't go severe around that area, and most of the tornadic activity is just pretty brief spin-ups, just because the nature of the geography there and how storms set up. A lot of Gulf-fueled moisture, but yeah, it was difficult in its own way to forecast down there. A lot of cold air damming, and that kicked my butt a few times. And we had a couple winter storms actually down there while I was there. I think I'm like a winter magnet now in my life. And 3 inches of snow shuts down the city for a week down there. So it's interesting to see what things cause hype in different areas around the country, and South Carolina is definitely one of those places where you even say the word snow and people freak.
Or even saying the word ice.
Yeah.
Because and you kind of got onto a topic of hype. The difference between hype where you are now, hype where you were in Lincoln, hype in South Carolina, and hype when you were in Reading, there's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
All you have to do is say one word and it freaks people out. For example, in the Midwest, you'd say tornadoes. That would probably freak people out. South Carolina, ice, snow. Severe weather, it's like, it happens quite often. You in Redding, California, where you were, all you'd have to do is say rain, and everybody will be like, "Yay!" They wouldn't even be excited. They wouldn't be freaking out. They'd be like, "We want rain, please." And in Utica, I think the big thing would be probably if there's still like the snow on the ground you have now, and then here comes a big storm that's going to dump 2 or 3 inches of rain, and then the Mohawk River just floods everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So you were down in South Carolina for how long before you finally gave up on wanting to?
I was down there for 6 months. We had a company buy our station. They were making some changes, and I wasn't so sure I wanted to stick around for them. My boyfriend got a job out in California with Google, so we decided to go out to California together, and Reading was about as close as I could get with my experience level to San Francisco. So it worked out pretty well. I was only out there for 3 months, wasn't under contract, and this station here in Utica called me out of the blue one day and said, "Hey, we have a chief job open. Are you interested?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." Like the whole point was to get back closer to home eventually. Just it wasn't the timing that I was expecting, but that's life for you, I guess.
So in a span of, let's say, 10 months, you went from South Carolina to California to New York.
Yes.
That's pretty much like the quickest way to get 3 jobs.
Yeah. It was kind of insane how it all lined up pretty nicely. And would I do another cross-country road trip anytime soon? Probably not. But I did get to, see a lot of the country, and it costs a lot of money to move across the country multiple times. But I'm glad to be back on my feet, closer to home. I pretty much go home every weekend now and spend some time with my family, which I haven't been able to do in 7 years, I guess, with college, and then me being on the road for 3 years of my career. But here I am, and it's been really nice so far.
Now, what do you think? Being in Utica, it's a fairly small market. It's kind of squeezed between bigger markets on either side of you.
Yes, yeah. Part of our market is actually kind of shared with the Syracuse market. Our county, Oneida County, we technically cover it all, but Syracuse covers part of it too. So we kind of overlap. It really depends on your cable provider if you get Utica stations or if you pick up the Syracuse feed. So it's definitely a different market than what I've been in so far. We only technically, our primary counties, there's only 3 of them. So it's good to be able to kind of focus on the smaller towns, which you have plenty of. I think it gives people more of a personal attachment to the forecast, whereas, in Lincoln we covered 20, 30 counties. South Carolina was like half the state. It's a small state, so it's just, a bigger population center. Here it's a good small town feel, but there's, the amenities of a small city.
So then the first thing I'd say is, because the thing about Utica is I watch, or I used to, there's a reason why I'm saying used to, watch a program that's actually aired on your station, Mohawk Valley Living.
Mm-hmm.
Yes? Oh, I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yeah.
And I like that show. And I only found that when I was looking at my relatives who are buried outside of Milford, New York, south of Cooperstown.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, ooh, this show is interesting. So I pretty much know everything about Utica now. Everything about everywhere, all the way down from Little Falls up to Rome. I pretty much know about everything. So
nice.
So it's like, okay, I know probably as much as you do about this area.
Yeah. I've picked up a lot along the way. I've been through Utica a bunch of times since I played volleyball in high school, and we played some teams out here, and I did some club volleyball, which travels all over the state, all over the country. So I've actually played at some high schools around here. I hadn't been back to Utica since my job interview for probably 5-6 years. So it was interesting to come back. It's kind of funny what you remember when you pass through years ago, and then you come back and you're like, oh right, that exists. So yeah, it's a nice little city. It's got its quirks. Great food here. I would say that about pretty much everywhere I've lived though, but the food is awesome here. There's a lot of little local culture, and you can tell that there is a ton of history around here. There's the old factories and mills and stuff that are now abandoned, closed up and stuff. But you can definitely tell that it used to be much bigger than it is now, and it's a little sad that it's come to this. But I think they're doing a lot of revitalization acts and stuff like that, and I think that the city's definitely going in a good direction, and it's cool to be here for the start of it, really.
So the weather, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of farming, not a whole lot, but do you kind of have to somewhat cater? Well, how would you cater your forecast to? There's some farmers, not many, but some, and a lot of urban people living in and around Utica, and then there's the people that live in the outlying areas. How do you cater a weather forecast for your viewing area?
We mostly do focus on the Utica Rome area as like the main focus. That's where we do like our tonight, tomorrow forecasts for. But there's actually surprisingly a lot of tourism here, outdoor tourism. So and then there's a fair amount of farming in some of our counties too. So it's cool to be able to think about what factors a lot of these people, like I've done a bunch of snowmobiling forecasts. That's huge out here. So I check out the hardness of the snowpack, on Friday nights and let people know what they can expect out on the trails. Just because, I mean, thousands of people come here from all over the country just to go up to Old Forge to go snowmobiling. Yeah. During the summer, we've got they call us the gateway of the Adirondacks. So we're right on the downslope of the Adirondacks. Tons of people come up here to go camping, fishing, hiking. So it's a lot of lifestyle forecasts. Then there's a fair amount of the farming communities. So I definitely pay attention to. I guess in the short time that I was here for harvest season, I guess, paid attention to the soil moisture, and that's something that I'm going to focus a little bit more on for the spring and the summer. And there's a big emphasis on the flooding and stuff too. I need to make sure that I'm monitoring that pretty closely because we've got not only the Mohawk River, we've got Delta Lake, which is a man-made lake, and then we've got a big reservoir off that too, just I think northwest of the city, which can affect that area up there pretty heavily. So it's kind of a little bit of everything. We don't get a ton of severe weather up here. We've had one tornado warning since I've been here, which was a little nuts, but we can get some pretty good thunderstorms. But the main impact with those is not so much the hail size. It's definitely the flood risk, flash flood risk, and the wind too, just because we've got a ton of lower lying communities. So those winds can come up the hills and be crazy down here in the valley. So it's a lot of little things that go into one forecast that mostly points to Utica proper. We've got, I think, 60,000 people here in the city, and our market size isn't much bigger than that. So it's not to say that I would be ignoring the people in the rural communities, but a lot of people are relying on the Utica point forecast, I guess you could say.
Now I've just lost track of what I was going to say. Typical me. But oh yeah, now I know. So like you said, pretty much in the area, the big deal or the thing that would hype people up, and we mentioned this before, flooding, maybe severe weather with wind or hail. A tornado may come, may not come. So pretty much the weather there, besides snow, which nobody there seems to care about, the weather is pretty much boring.
I wouldn't say it's boring. I think
It'll be unboring now.
there's less extreme events, I guess you could say. The summers are great here because it can be a big deal if it gets up to 90 degrees, which is awesome for me. And I particularly love the summer. So days like that are kind of a big deal. You hear 90 degrees and people perk their ears up for sure. Flooding is definitely a big impact around here, just with all the communities along the river. And thunderstorms can actually be a big deal around here. Just before I came here last July, I believe, they had EF1 tornado in a community not too far from here, and it did some damage in that community, and then we had some straight line damage here, actually not too far from the station. Probably we're kind of on top of a small mountain, so it's down off the hill a little bit, probably 3/4 of a mile away. Trees uprooted, some good damage to houses. So I think that's made people more aware of the fact that it can happen. I wouldn't say that people are numb to it happening around here, but I think that event put a better perspective on the fact that Central New York can see severe weather and will see severe weather if the right ingredients are there.
Okay, so we're going to do this. We're going to skip the California part because you were only there a few months, but compare from your time in Lincoln and I believe it's Columbia, South Carolina.
Yes.
Okay, and where you are now. Of those three stations, would you have at any of them gone on the air for a severe thunderstorm warning?
Yes, we had a pretty rigorous set of severe coverage criteria in Lincoln. We only went on for a severe thunderstorm warning if it was impacting the actual city of Lincoln itself, if it was in city limits, and if that happened, we would go on and stay on until it was out of city limits, or we could see that it was weakening quite a bit. But because Lincoln is basically a population center in the city, and then there's really not a whole lot going on outside the city limits, a lot of our viewing area was very Lincoln-centric. So for that, we would go on for a severe thunderstorm warning. In Columbia, I never went on the air for a severe thunderstorm warning, and I'm trying to recall if in my time there we did it all. That one was a little bit different because we only had a 10 p.m. show. So, a lot of the thunderstorms that I've covered on air have been late afternoon, early evening, so we could, either take over an entire newscast and focus just on weather, or we do some cut-ins along the way. Here, I'm actually still working on my severe weather plan for here. I kind of walked in on this job. They went without a chief for 6 months, so it's pretty much a clean slate here. I have gone on air a couple times for a severe thunderstorm warning, just because, it doesn't happen quite as often here. So when they do come through, people are concerned and they want to know what's going on. So I think that's my duty to inform them. But I'm working on a more precise set of guidelines that I'm going to follow. I'm a one-man shop here. I'm the only meteorologist in-house. We only do Monday through Friday shows. So, we're going to make some changes, have a severe weather plan, because I think it's important that we have some guidelines to follow. Like, if this happens in this town, what do we do? So I think that coverage is going to change a little bit. We just got a new news director who's definitely taking the station in the right direction and wants to make weather a good priority. So I think that that things are looking pretty good here for severe weather coverage if need be, and I'm excited to see, one, what happens with the weather and if it ever comes to that, and two, if how we're gonna, go about covering it. So yeah, I've definitely done it for a severe thunderstorm warning. I think that's important in a lot of places, even out in the Midwest when it happens every night.
Oh well. Now, well, the interesting thing, and I only mention this because some people, especially with tornado warnings, which I would assume you'd just be on the air and stay there, because there's no question. But sometimes severe thunderstorm warnings, people say, oh, it's a severe thunderstorm warning, big whoop. And I'll go back to this. I've mentioned this on this show numerous times. This was back at the end of June last year, where I was under a severe thunderstorm warning where I live. And and it's a squall line. You know how Iowa squall lines can be.
Yeah.
They can be nasty. And along the squall line, there were spin-up tornadoes, which made it really hard. But I digress. Anyway, the squall line is pretty much straight north to south and is moving east fairly quickly. There's this little bowing segment that came in from the south right along the eastward moving squall line. That southward little bumped out, came in from the south and went right over my town. Somebody took a picture of a funnel cloud. We're not sure if that's what it was. And it completely raked the town I live in, took out a third of the trees. The winds were at least over 90, and there was a severe thunderstorm warning. I think there may have been a tornado warning, but I don't think there was. I think it was a severe thunderstorm warning. And I saw the local people staying on the air, but the only reason they were on the air is because there was a tornado warning somewhere else, but they were focusing most of their attention on the squall line because it looked worse. And I would assume if you're going to see winds, if in the case of severe thunderstorm warning, if there's a wind, if the wind is going to be 80, 90 miles an hour, would you treat that as if it was a tornado? Because 80, 90 mile an hour winds in Utica or anywhere in that area is going to knock down a lot of trees and it's going to act like a tornado.
Yeah.
So would that make some sense if you had to stay on the air if it was like a very severe thunderstorm warning?
Right. Yeah. I think that with the new coverage plan that we're going to roll out, it's a judgment call, and it will be something that I definitely have to pay attention to. It can be really difficult during severe weather coverage to stay focused and go from storm to storm, make sure you're touching on everything, because there can be, you can get really excited by radar and see that there's something that looks really bad, but you also have to pay attention to the development of the storms behind it, out ahead of it, because a lot of those ones, if they're cellular things, can blow up pretty quickly, and squall lines here are going to be a big thing for sure. Most of the storms around here are usually pretty linear. We don't get a ton of supercells around here. So it's definitely a focus on the whole picture and not get too caught up in just one storm. And I think I've learned from a lot of my former colleagues. They've done a great job of mentoring me along the way, that we do need to, take a second or two during coverage, get a look at the bigger picture and make sure there isn't something more that we need to be focusing on. And that's something that I'm going to need to work on, because it's me and it's me only. I won't have, the guidance of someone else there, mic'd up or not, that would say, hey, maybe we need to take a look at this cell or this area. So it will definitely be a learning game over the next couple seasons, but I think I'll gain some valuable experience. That is, if we do get any severe weather here this summer, because that can happen too. But yeah.
And then you mentioned it being the only person there.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to be really hard, especially, let's say, we have some rare outbreak that could occur?
Yeah, it's
Could that really bring up the stress? Or would you, in that case, if it ended up being that it was an outbreak, which would be very rare,
mm-hmm.
would they come to the point that maybe you have to get a news person in there, like at the news desk while you're at the green wall or wherever, and they're doing the storm reports, you're doing the on camera, here's the storms now, you're doing the nowcasting, and they're looking at the storm reports, so you don't
Yeah.
have to do 500 different things.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly how we're going to set up storm coverage now. My news director is very into weather. Sometimes he'll either see things on Twitter or, he's got a lot of friends in the business. He's been in the business for 30 years, something like that. So sometimes he'll think of things that even I haven't thought of. So I think that if it was a long form, continuous coverage event, it would definitely be, me in the weather center, me at the wall, whatever, and the people in the newsroom, they know how to hop on my weather service chat. I usually have that up in here. They know what it looks like, what to look for, and they know that things come in, first to that. So that's something that they'll be able to do. They're going to have to handle things like social media. It would not be easy for me to be on air and hop on Twitter and say, hey, a tornado is coming to this community, at the same time as I'm saying that on air. So it will be a true test of my stress level, I think. But now is as good a time as any to kind of jump in with both feet and hope that it ends up going pretty well, which I am confident that it would.
Now, there's an app that you and I think your husband are involved in. I think it's your husband.
Boyfriend, but...
Boyfriend, husband, whatever. The Updraft app. Talk about that a little bit.
That was kind of our baby when we were out in California. We wanted to do something that has never been kind of touched on before. And I've always, complained that I can't get this on iPad. I can't get this on my phone. It's like it's hard to navigate BuffKit on a computer, let alone having an easy way to have it on your tablet or phone. And he's like, oh, we could totally do that. He's into app development and programming and lots of things like that. You could tell him to do anything, and he could pretty much drum something up. It's pretty great. But yeah, we decided to put our heads together. The cross-country move has slowed down the process of it for sure, and there's still a lot to work out. But I think it's something that the meteorology community needs and wants for sure. Before we even dove into it, I just kind of wanted to see what the interest level was, and as soon as I said it, they were like, wow, you can do that? Like, that would be great. That's what we've been looking for forever. The difficult thing with it is that we're basically taking, a piece of the government's software and trying to make it in a much cleaner format. I mean, I can navigate BuffKit no problem, but it took me years of playing around with it to figure it out. So what we wanted to do was not dumb it down, but make it more of a user-friendly thing, because it's a very powerful forecast tool. You can, I mean, I don't want to say you could make a forecast solely from it, but you can get a lot of good information for a forecast that you can get other places, but not in the same format or not in the same, forecast soundings. You can't find those just anywhere on the internet. You kind of have to dig around for them, and that's something that you can pull up on BuffKit and click through them, and that's that. So we initially want to do it for iPad first. That'll be the easiest Aaron says, because you have a bigger display to work with, which you need a lot of display controls and stuff with BuffKit. So it'll be a little bit harder to scale it down to an iPhone, but now that they're getting bigger, and it would be a very data heavy app now that data coverage and data plans are getting a little bit better. I think that will be easier in the near future. We did have a Kickstarter to fund it because obviously we are working full-time jobs and can't just put everything on hold to put all of our energy in it. It didn't get funded all the way, so we don't have any money backing it right now. So it's kind of a side project that is slow but hopefully steady in the near future. It'll be very cool if it comes together, and I think it might get some more people into the deeper forecasting element of weather instead of just clicking through the NAM precip and stuff. It'll pull more people into the science element, we hope.
So when you see with this app that's hopefully coming maybe this year or maybe next, we don't know when, where do you see the future in weather, or in your career on television? Where do you see it in 5, 10, 15 years? Do you see more apps? Do you see more one man or one woman TV stations where, like in your situation, where it's just you and there's nobody else? Do you see more of that happening in smaller markets? Do you see a lot of stations getting rid of news altogether, and meteorologists in the broadcast field are going to become a rare commodity in maybe 10 or 20 years?
Yeah, I could definitely tell you that the industry is already starting to evolve. Now there's a lot more emphasis on social media and an internet presence. So it was kind of difficult to walk into the field at a time where social media was just becoming a bigger thing than it was in the past. So I couldn't tell you exactly what the industry is going to look like 10, 15 years from now, but I think that meteorologists would be the last to go. Basically, weather carries almost every newscast in the country. That's what people tune in for, so I've heard a million times. So I think it's very easy for people to hop on their phones and either get a pre-made forecast, or if you're into weather, you can look at some things on your phone and put together your own in your head, or negate the ones that you see on Yahoo Weather and stuff like that. But I think this app it's a good time and place for it, because if there's no TV industry, I got to look into other parts of the field. So I think the app game is definitely the right place to be, because that's what everyone's turning to now. And there's always going to be meteorologists. You'll need them somewhere, and meteorologists are going to need a good way to get data. And I think this app would be a good gateway into being still needed, but in a different way than hopping on TV and telling you what the weekend will look like.
Now, do you see maybe something that hasn't been thought of more apps that could be used in the future that would still need meteorologists around?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think that you're always going to need a face, so to speak, to go with a lot of things that haven't been developed yet. I think you could turn a lot of these model apps. I think that a lot of people were just trying to get them out and on the iPhone, on Android. So I think there can be a lot more, tweaking and editing and making things more efficient and better in a good layout, because we're getting to the point where, yeah, pretty much anyone can make an app, but does it look good? Does it function well? Does it crash, every other time you open it? So you're always going to need a person to go with these forecasts and this data, because computers can only do so much. And I think that in our lifetimes we're not going to get to the point where a computer alone is good enough.
Yeah. Do you fear that that's what may end up happening? Is they're just going to say, we're not going to forecast, we'll let the computers do the forecasting?
I don't know that it would ever come to that in the near future, but the computers, models, data, they're all getting better by the week, the year. I mean, GFS looks great now. I've been waiting for that for a long time. But does that mean that it does a good job with handling the systems that come through? Not necessarily. So I don't think it will ever get to the point where the robots run us. I think that someone has to look at everything that comes in and put all the pieces together in the right way.
So you could easily say that the meteorologist would become quality control.
Yeah, I think that it might come to that. But there are so many people, myself included, that like seeing data come in and just picking out the right ones and putting it together, that's not enough. We're not wired that way. Weather enthusiasts, meteorologists, they want to have the best forecast. They want to put together the most accurate. And I don't think it's just a matter of seeing what comes in and, taking the average of two highs that come through on different models and picking the middle ground. I don't think it'll be like that. I think that people are always going to want to see data and make a judgment call on their own. I think that's like one of the most rewarding parts of the job is putting together that forecast, that why you picked those numbers, that sky condition, whatever. So I wouldn't say quality control, but I think that meteorologist jobs might evolve a little bit in different ways. I think things might get a little bit easier in some ways, but I think we're always going to have the same role. It just will be a different way of getting the information to where it needs to go.
So the future is not as dreary as some people would think, but it's probably not going to be, like most people have said, it's not going to be the same as it was, and it may not be the same as it is now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think there will ever be a time where meteorologists are not needed. Everyone interacts with people on a daily basis. There's no one out there that just works with computers and that's it. And weather is like a topic of conversation that everyone can relate to. And us meteorologists love to talk. We love to talk about weather. You can ask us anything about the weather and we'll go off for 10, 15 minutes if you let us. So I think the passion and the drive is there for most people and will stay that way. It's just, how is the world going to need weather information? We'll have to figure that out and evolve as technology gets a little better.
Now, we'll finish with this before we do our shout-outs. Now, there's a lot more women in meteorology now than there used to be, and you're one of several that are in chief positions, which in your case, you're the only one there. So, do you have a feeling that that you're kind of leading the way, or any of the women chiefs that are out there leading the way for more girls to get into science and stuff? Because it's not like it's just a man's thing, because
Mm-hmm.
some girls we want to try to get them into this field, if it's not meteorology, at least into the sciences.
Right. Yeah. I would hope that I serve as kind of an ambassador to that. That's one of the things that I love the most about this job is finding other women that are either in my position or want to be in my position and making sure that all the right roads are paved for them. I think that as a female chief, it's definitely harder to be a female chief than it is to be a male chief, even though it's 2015. I have been told that this is a man's job, and that was in 2014. I am, I guess you could say, even though it's a small market, I'm pretty young to be a chief. So I did get lucky and playing my cards right to get this job. But I think that education standards need to change a little bit in, as far back as elementary school. I think teachers need to not just focus on, getting the material out and hoping that everyone passes and does well on the standardized exams, that kind of thing. I think that you need to foster to younger girls and saying that liking math, liking science is okay. Like, you're not weird, you're not a weirdo or a loser or anything like that. And I think in today's society that can be difficult because pretty much everywhere you go is a popularity contest, and are math and science going to get you to the top? Well, maybe someday, but when you're in middle school and you love science, you might not be the most popular one out there, and that's what I think a lot of younger kids are focusing on. So I think that it comes down to the teachers and making sure that there's programs that girls can get involved in where it's okay to like math and science and weather and robotics, engineering, whatever. Because I think a lot of kids don't have a place where they can feel okay and feel good about liking science and math and stuff like that.
So yeah, we there needs to be a lot more of that with the girls getting into it, and in anything, that instead of just being kind of thinking more about how they look or whatever and stuff like that, but getting them into stuff that'll get them better prepared for the future, because in 20, 30, 40 years it's going to be way different than it is now.
Yeah, and I think it's gotten a lot better. It feels a lot easier to be, especially in the broadcast field, it feels a lot better now to be a woman who might be in charge than it did even just 3 years ago. It took a lot for me to come out of my shell, just because at one point I was the only female in the market, I think, in Lincoln. So it's cool to see how that's evolved and has changed and gotten a lot easier, but I think we still have a long way to come, and we need all the support we can get. I think that our male colleagues need to support us just as much as they would support another male colleague. So I think everyone's thinking needs to change a little bit, and I don't think it's an issue in a lot of markets and a lot of different lanes in this field. But I still think that it's 2015. Women can do anything. We've been able to vote for like 100 years. So I think we need to be respected, and it can be difficult in the broadcast field because you really do have to pay attention to how you look, and that's a big focus. But we need to change people's minds in that it's not about the dress that we're wearing or how our hair looks that day. It's the message that we're putting out there. We're giving you the forecast, and that should be a big deal to you. It shouldn't be a big deal that we wore that pink dress 2 times last week.
Yeah, so we're going to do our shout outs, and this could be weather related. This could be not weather related because mine's not weather related. I'll do mine first. While we were doing this show, there was a girls' state high school basketball game, and in Iowa, girls' state basketball is like a big thing. And girls' state basketball, there's always like a winter weather issue. It seems like once in a while. You probably have heard about that. And there was an icy, freezy, yucky mess earlier this week, so we count that. Anyway, I lived for 6 years in Springville, in Iowa, and they were in the state championship game tonight. It was on during the show. And I just found out they lost on a last-second bucket and lost by 2 points. But I shout them out anyway because that's their third time they've been to the state title game in 7 years. So
nice.
They won once, but they finished runner-up the other 2 times. So darn, but they still did well anyway. And I didn't go to that high school. I only lived in that town 6 years, but I adopted them. Because my high school, they didn't get there. So anyway, you can, Rachel, shout out whoever, shout out old colleagues, shout out the Mohawk Valley living people, which I'm not happy about because they went to monthly shows instead of weekly shows. That's why I don't like it.
I guess my shout out would go to all of my Midwestern counterparts. Miss being out there, and I'm jealous of everyone that's still out there. And also to I'm judging an Odyssey of the Mind competition tomorrow, and I don't think my high school will be at the one that I'm judging, but I'm always excited to see New York State teams do well. The world competition actually gets held in at Iowa State every few years or so. So, teams from all over the world show up to Iowa in May or June, I believe. So good luck to everyone that's competing tomorrow. And I'm judging the 4th and 5th grade teams, so I don't think any of them are out there tonight, but I'll, see what I can do for them.
Now you're leading me into something. Okay, when you were, we're going to go down this path. When you were at Iowa State, how many of the ones that you went to school with are in broadcast meteorology now that you know of?
Like the ones that I graduated with?
Yeah.
Let's see. I think only a handful. There were only 20 in my graduating class, and a lot of them went to grad school. A couple of them got weather service jobs, and I want to say there's probably only 3 or 4 of us that made it in broadcast and have stuck with it.
And does that seem to be like a typical ratio that a lot of them go to grad school?
Yeah, I think Iowa State is a very research-heavy institution. Yes. So, there aren't any broadcast classes that are related to, like, within the meteorology program. You basically have to get a journalism minor, which is almost impossible with the course that you have to take for meteorology. But yeah, I would say only a handful from each class actually go into broadcast and end up sticking with it, and don't end up, in the private sector a couple of years later. So it's not surprising to me, especially with basically half my class going to grad school.
Because it is odd that it seems like there's quite a few Iowa Staters in my market. A couple.
Yeah. Are you in the Cedar Rapids?
Cedar Rapids market, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of Iowa State grads. A lot of good friends.
Yeah, and the thing, and it's odd because when you hear about broadcast meteorology, you hear Mississippi State.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like at least 2/3, if not more, come from there. Mm-hmm. But then when you think about it, there's like other meteorology schools too, and everybody like focuses on the big schools: Mississippi State, Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. It's like Iowa State's like an afterthought. Was that kind of how you thought when you picked a school? Because you
Um,
picked Iowa State. You could have picked Oklahoma and seen a tornado.
True, right. I picked Iowa State because on some, top meteorology schools list, it was number three behind Cornell and MIT. So I thought that was pretty good for a public school. And I had been out to Iowa State for the Odyssey of the Mind competition. I loved campus and everything. But yeah, you don't hear a lot about Iowa State grads being in the broadcast industry. Yeah, I know a lot of Mississippi State grads, and they're some of the best broadcasters I know. So I have a lot of respect for them. But it is hard to find Iowa State grads, and it's always interesting to me. I have been when I apply for the jobs that I have been searching for. I at the end of my contracts, I send out dozens of resumes and stuff. So it's always fun to hop on the station's website and see where the weather team went to school. And it's always interesting when I find like an older chief that went to Iowa State that I haven't heard of because, I'm a fairly newish graduate, but it's always like, I do a little celebration dance because we were both names at some point in our lives.
Yeah. I mean, I went to Iowa State for a year, and then the calculus pretty much killed that off. So, but yeah, when I picked schools, I was down to either Iowa State or St. Cloud State in Minnesota. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, well, in state, since I lived in Iowa, went over then having to go out of state. So.
Yeah. Yeah, out of state tuition is still kicking my butt 3 years later, but
Yeah. I'm yeah, I'm older, and I still have my student loans.
yeah, they're
I'm
not
down to
fun.
my
But
last one though.
yeah, I wish I was a little bit more diligent in finding some like side scholarships and stuff. I had a decent scholarship at Iowa State, but still had to pay part of my tuition. I had a full scholarship to Florida State to play volleyball, but decided I didn't want to, let sports rule my life. That was a chapter of my life that was pretty much over. But now I look back and I'm like, it would be nice to not have student loans right now, but I love the education I got. I think some of the best professors in the nation teach at Iowa State, and I wouldn't have it any other way now that I'm here and gotten to this point in my life.
Oh, so you're trying. So what do you think about Dr. Gallus, who was on our show?
Yeah, he was awesome. Definitely one of my favorite professors. He also taught the more interesting weather classes, which helped a lot when you're taking all of the calculus and the physics. It's easy to lose sight of where this major is going, and his classes reeled you back in, brought you back down to reality that, oh right, this math is used to do something with forecasting or weather or whatever. So yeah, I learned a lot from him. He was my one of my mentors for my senior thesis. So he got me good information, kept me grounded, and his classes were definitely the most interesting. But a lot of note taking in that class. I think everyone left his classes and they're shaking their hands because it was a lot of writing.
Yeah, because I never got that far because I was still stuck in doing all the prerequisite gobbledygook. So, and that kind of made me a bit miffed. That it's like, I'm a meteorology major. Why am I not taking any meteorology courses?
Yeah, that was definitely the most frustrating part of it. And I had to take Calc 2 twice, so we've all been there. I know I had talked to a lot of upperclassmen as a freshman, and I was like, how do you guys even do this? And they're like, you have to put your head down and just get through it because it does get better, and it may take years, but yeah, I got out in 4 years, and I would say that I'm pretty lucky to have gotten it all done in 4 years because I think college now has turned into 5 years. Oh, there it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have it. I still kept it after all these years.
That's funny. Yeah, I probably should have burned my calculus book, but I think I sold it to an underclassman or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I have a better appreciation for math now. I always said, like, if TV just blew up and did not exist tomorrow, that I'd get my teaching certification and teach high school physics, because I look back now and I'm like, high school physics was, I wish that I paid attention a little bit better, and um, I think there were some good applications that I probably could have used years later from that, and I think that being able to, be right into that younger age group and try and rope them into liking science would be cool to be on the front lines of that.
Or math. It seems like math,
Yeah,
math, 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 math. I
lots of
think
math.
from what I've heard or I've seen, I think you would have taking a meteorology major. You would have only been, I think, a couple of credits away from a math major.
Yeah, I think you only had to take like one extra math class outside of the laid out 4-year plan to end up with a math major. And I think in some colleges, meteorology majors just automatically like end up with a math minor. But that was not the case for Iowa State, because math was God there.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it for the show tonight. Because unless we have nothing else, because I don't think there's anything else. I do have a news item before we go. Ricky Matthews, who was on our show back on show number 4, way back last March, almost a year ago, he announced today that he is going into the business of broadcast meteorology. He took a weekend job at WCYB in Bristol, Virginia. He announced that today on Twitter. He's graduating, I believe it's this spring, from UNC Charlotte. Another school that doesn't seem to get a lot of broadcast mets, but he's going to be one of them. So he's going into the business. He could, if they ever had a weekend person up there, he could be yours.
Yeah, first we need to get a weekend show. I think we'd get a morning show first, but hopefully that's in the works in the next couple of years, and I'll get to have a team of my own.
Well, at least another person. So
Yeah, that's still a team.
yeah, still. And then heading off into the shows upcoming next week. Oh, this could be interesting. Dr. Tony Lupo from the University of Missouri. I'm sure you don't like Missouri, but they're not in Iowa State's conference either. And
I don't have an opinion anymore.
I will make a mention. He will not be in the state of Missouri for that show. In fact, he will not even be in this country. So we'll just leave it at that. We'll tell you where he's at later on. And then looking after that, we have Jason Prentice, who is an Iowa State grad, on March 27th. He's at Whether or Not, in the weather consulting firm out of Kansas City. There is a guest that we have scheduled for April 3rd, Good Friday. I am not going to mention who it is, but it is somebody that is famous. Tom Coombs over in South Bend, Indiana, will be on April 10th to discuss the 50th anniversary of Palm Sunday, 1965. And Eric Wilhelm from WFMJ in Youngstown, Ohio, will be on May 1st. And we will have some discussion of the 30th anniversary of the outbreak of tornadoes in Ohio and Pennsylvania at that point. And we're having other guests that are possibly going to get scheduled here and there. So if there's no other business, which I don't think there is, this has been Polygon Issuance number 49. We do this every Friday when we can at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern, or 5 p.m. Pacific over Google Hangouts. You can watch us anytime, either live or delayed, either on the Polygon site on Iowa Weather Network or on my YouTube account thing. It'll be there. And Rachel, how can anybody get a hold of you if they need to get a hold of you?
You can shoot me an email, rwitter@wutr.tv, or follow me on Twitter. My handle is WeatherWitter. Weather is spelled out. I love Twitter, and I'm a little wacky on there, so I'd love new followers. You not only get weather information from Central New York, but some of my inner thoughts.
including crazy selfies at this place that she was at earlier.
Yes, selfies occasionally.
So, and you can get hold of me. I'm on Twitter at IowaWX, spelled out IOWAWX on Twitter. You can email me at iowawx@gmail.com. I just got iowawx just taken. So, otherwise, if we're all done, everybody have a happy, safe weekend. Hopefully it warms up wherever you are, because it should for me, and maybe it should for Rachel as well. And God bless.